Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Driti Atri, and you're watching Skyline. Now, tonight we have stories that could directly affect Indians abroad, families planning to move overseas, students dreaming of study in America, and even those who simply want to travel. Well, the US is considering tough immigration measures. Deportation policies are becoming stricter. Fear is growing in immigrant communities. In fact, a heartbreaking tragedy has shaken an Indian family in America. And finally, a new global passport ranking has left many Indians disappointed. Well, these stories may seem unrelated, but they all have point towards one big reality. The future and rules of immigration are changing. Governments are becoming stricter, borders are becoming harder to cross, and millions of migrants are feeling the impact. So let's start with it. First of all, can you imagine having planned one of the happiest moments of your life? You are expecting a baby. You booked your tickets, you pack your bags, and just before boarding your flight, you are told that you cannot be allowed to enter the United States. Sounds unbelievable, right? Well, this could become a reality for many foreign travelers if the latest discussion inside Washington that moves forward. The debate over birthright citizenship, it is once again making headlines in America. So recently, the US Supreme Court upheld the protection of birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment, rejecting attempts to remove automatic citizenship for children that are born in the United States. For the White House, however, the legal battle, it may not be over. According to several reports, officials are now looking at another way to tackle what they describe as birth tourism. One proposal that is being discussed is tighter travel restriction for pregnant foreign women who are suspected of traveling to the US mainly to give birth to their baby. Authorities are also reportedly considering action towards people and companies that promote or maybe sell birth tourism packages. But first, what exactly is this birth tourism? Let me explain it to you. Birth tourism, that refers to the practice where some foreign nationals travel to the US on temporary visas just to give birth over there. Because a child born on the US soil is generally entitled to be a US citizen under recent constitutional rule. Now, critics argue that this exploits a loophole in the immigration system, while others say it is a legal consequence of existing citizenship law. But yes, this debate is not really new. In fact, during Mr. Trump's first term also, US consular officers, they were instructed to more closely examine visa application from pregnant women when they believed the main purpose of travel, that was childbirth. Now, the conversation appears to be returning. Some lawmakers are even supporting legislation that would tighten the entry rule for pregnant foreign nationals. In fact, there are also speculations that airline policies for pregnant passengers traveling to the US, it could eventually become stricter, although no such changes have been officially announced. Now, think about it. If these proposals become reality, how will immigration officers decide who is traveling for genuine medical reasons and who is traveling only for birth tourism? Will every pregnant woman face extra questioning? Will airlines ask for more medical documents? Will visa approvals become harder? Well, these are the questions that still do not have clear answers. But one thing is certain here, immigration policy in America, that is becoming tougher. The focus is no longer only on illegal immigration. Even legal visitors could face stricter scrutiny depending on the purpose of their travel. Well, for thousands of Indian families who travel to the United States every year, this is a development worth watching closely. But yes, if tighter entry rules are one side of America's immigration policy, our next story shows what happens after people are already inside the country. Because Washington's deportation strategy, it is now expanding far beyond its own borders. Can you imagine being told that you are being deported? You prepare yourself to return to your country, but instead, the aircraft lands in a country you have never visited. A country where you have no relative, no friends, no legal support, and in some cases, you don't even know why you were sent there. It sounds like the plot of a spy movie, right? But ladies and gentlemen, according to an AFP investigation, that is exactly what some deportees say they have experienced under America's expanding deportation policy. The report says that the US has increasingly relied on agreements with several African countries to accept deportees from third country. It also says Washington has used these measures such as visa restriction while encouraging governments to cooperate with these arrangements. Now, according to the lawyers quoted by AFP, some deportees were sent to countries where they had no personal connection and they were left in what they described as legal black hole. Some alleged that they were detained without any charges or struggled to access legal assistance. Well, the investigation includes accounts from deportees who say that they were flown to countries such as Eswatini, Equatorial Guinea, Ghana, or others, sometimes without even telling their destination until they were already on the aircraft. Now, here the Trump administration has defended its border immigration crackdown, saying that enforcing immigration law and strengthening border security that remains its top priorities. Supporters argue that every country has the right to remove people who no longer have legal permission to remain there. However, critics argue that deporting people to third country where they have no ties, that is a serious legal and humanitarian concern. So, ladies and gentlemen, the debate definitely continues. Where should deportees be sent? Should they always return to their country of origin? Or can government legally send them wherever they feel like? Now, these are complicated legal questions that governments and human rights organizations continue to debate. But one thing is clear here. America's immigration policy is becoming more aggressive, and countries far away from the US, they are now becoming part of that policy. For migrants across the world, this sends a clear message, though the rules are changing and governments are becoming far more determined to enforce them. But yes, while immigration remains one of the biggest stories, let's now turn to something more positive. Our next story is about travel, tourism, and a country where Indians continue to arrive in record numbers. Well, that's coming up next in Skyline. Well, let's move from immigration to travel, because while some countries are making it harder for people to enter, another country is seeing more international visitors than ever before. And there is one country that is playing a major role in that growth: India. That's right, Melbourne Airport in Australia has recorded its busiest financial year for international travel since it opened in 1970. Nearly 37 million passengers traveled through the airport during the last financial year, while international passengers traffic that crossed about 12 million for the very first time. Now, here's the interesting part. When officials looked at where international visitors were coming from, China remained number one, New Zealand was second, and India was third. Can you think what that tells us? Just a few years ago, thousands of Indians, they were traveling abroad mainly for holidays. Today, Indians are traveling for education, for job, for business, for families, and for a better future. Indian students continue choosing Australian universities. Well, professionals are moving for work opportunity. Families are visiting relatives. Tourists are exploring Australia in record number. Now, this growing moment is changing the relationship between India and Australia. Every new flight carries students chasing dreams, parents visiting their children, professionals starting new career, and tourists discovering a new country. Melbourne Airport says that it is now investing heavily to prepare for even more passengers in the coming year. The airport has announced plans for a $4.5 billion expansion, including improvement to its international terminal, a third runway, and better transport facility. Officials are also working on a new digital arrival process to make international travel smoother here. That's a good news for Indian travelers. Better airport facility usually means faster immigration, shorter waiting time, and a very comfortable travel experience. But yes, there is another point worth noticing here. The airport also said that flight capacity through major West Asian hubs such as Dubai, Doha, and Abu Dhabi are still not fully recorded, partly because of recent regional conflict. And that shows us something important here. Events happening thousands of kilometers away, whether it is a war, political instability, or airline disruption, it can affect passengers around the globe. Travel today is more connected than ever before. One crisis and one vision, it can change flight schedules across continents. But still, India's position as one of Melbourne Airport's biggest international market, that shows just how strong the people-to-people connection between the two nations has really become. But yes, while thousands of Indians are building successful lives abroad, sometimes heartbreaking stories remind us that every family carries its own struggles. Our next story comes from Florida, where one Indian family was shattered in just a few tragic moments. Our next story is painful. It is difficult to talk about, but it is also important. Because behind every headline, there is a family whose life changes forever. Well, a Gujarati family living in the United States has been left devastated after a shooting inside their own home in Florida. And this is a report by I Am Gujarat. According to Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, a 27-year-old Parth Patel allegedly shot his father, 55-year-old Hitesh Patel, during an argument before taking his own life. Well, Hitesh Patel, he was rushed to the hospital, but later he couldn't survive. Investigators say that Parth had traveled from Ohio to visit his parents in Florida. During the visit, an argument reportedly broke out after his father made a comment. Within minutes, the whole situation had turned violent. Police also said the initial investigation indicated that Parth had been dealing with mental health issues. Now, think how quickly life can change. One moment, a family is sitting together at home. The next, everything is gone. Neighbors are left in shock, relatives receive heartbreaking phone calls, and an entire family is destroyed. Police are still investigating several important questions, though, including how Parth obtained the firearm and the exact sequence of the event inside the house. Authorities have not yet released any complete detail about everyone who was present during the incident. Sadly, this is not an isolated case here. The report mentions another recent incident involving Indian origin families in the US, where individuals were reported mental health issues. They were accused of killing close family members. Now, these cases remind us that mental health, that is not something that should be ignored. It is not a sign of weakness. It is not something to hide. Whether somebody lives in India, America, or elsewhere, anywhere, mental health challenges need timely support and treatment. Because sometimes the warning signs that remains invisible until it is too late. Now, this whole tragedy, it is not just one family. It is a reminder for all to talk, to listen, to seek help when needed, and to never ignore any emotional struggle. But yes, while one Gujarati family is mourning an unimaginable loss, another challenge is troubling many Indian business owners in America. This time, the issue is not violence, but fear, trust, and immigration law. And that's our next story, ladies and gentlemen. Well, running a business is never easy. But imagine working day and night to build your dream, hiring employees, trusting them with your own money, giving them food, and sometimes even a place to stay. And then one day, they disappear along with your cash. Well, that's the problem that many Gujarati business owners in America, they say that they are facing today. According to reports, several business owners have recently complained that employees working at motel, convenience store, and gas station allegedly stole money before suddenly leaving their job. It's a report by I Am Gujarat. In fact, in some cases, the reported amount, it was a few $1,000s. But here's where the story becomes even more complicated. Some of these business owners say that they cannot even go to the police. Why? Because the employees that they hired allegedly did not have legal work authorization. The report says that some employers, they fear that if they report the theft, authorities could investigate them for employing undocumented workers, which itself can lead to serious legal consequences. So, think about the situation. You did one thing wrong. If you stay silent, you lose your money. If you complain, you could face legal trouble yourself. Now, for many small business owners, this has become a painful dilemma. In fact, the report also says that such incidents have increased over the past several months. Some owners claim that workers suddenly disappear overnight after taking the money from cash register or leaving without any notice. At the very same time, many honest workers continue doing their job sincerely every single day. That is an important point to remember though. The action of a few people should never define an entire community. Still, the issue has created growing anxiety among business owners. Well, here many say that labor shortage has already made it difficult to find reliable employees. Now, fear of theft and stricter immigration enforcement are making the whole situation even more stressful. Reports also suggest that businesses employing the undocumented workers that businesses could face heavy fines and even criminal penalty under the US immigration law. So the pressure is increasing from every direction. Business owners need workers need jobs, but stricter immigration enforcement, it is changing the entire environment for everyone. Well, for many immigrant entrepreneurs, the American dream is still alive, but running a business that is becoming more challenging than ever before. And yes, while business owners are worried about their employees, thousands of undocumented immigrants are now worried about something else entirely. They are worried about a knock on the door, or maybe an unexpected encounter on the street, because IC operations are once again increasing in one of America's biggest cities. Well, for many immigrants living without legal status in America, every phone call, every knock on the door, or every police vehicle passing by, it can bring fear. That fear is growing once again in Chicago, by the way. Chicago is home to largest immigrant population, including many undocumented Indians. And according to reports, immigration enforcement activity has increased again after videos surfaced showing masked IC agents carrying out arrests in different parts of the city. In the meantime, community organizations say that many undocumented immigrants, they are once again afraid to leave their homes. Some fear going to the work. Others are nervous about visiting public places. Even routine activities have become stressful for them. Well, according to the report, around 38 undocumented immigrants were arrested in the Chicago area over the past 2 weeks. Immigration advocates also claim that enforcement teams have been operating near schools and other public locations. The report also recalls similar operations carried out last year, when hundreds of undocumented immigrants, they were arrested, and some Indian nationals were detained while their asylum case that was still pending. In the meantime, the Department of Homeland Security has not yet released detailed information about ongoing enforcement operation. Officials have, however, continued to emphasize stricter immigration enforcement and higher deportation number across the country. This reflects a much bigger trend here. Immigration enforcement that is no longer focused on the US-Mexico border. Operations are increasingly taking place inside American cities. That means undocumented immigrants are facing greater uncertainty, regardless of how long they have been living in the US. Well, for many families, every day begins with a same question. Will today be the day everything changes? Some are preparing emergency plans, some are arranging legal documents. Others are simply hoping that they are not stopped while driving to work or dropping their children at school. And that's what happens when you enter a country illegally. For many Indian families living legally in America, though, these developments may not affect them directly, but for those whose immigration status that remains unclear, the atmosphere has once again become tensed. And yes, while immigration policies continue to dominate the headlines, our final story tonight looks at something that every Indian carries while traveling abroad: an Indian passport. So the question is, has its global standing improved or declined? That's the final story coming up next on Skyline. If you have an Indian passport, how powerful it is today? Has India's global standing improved, or has traveling abroad become even more difficult? Well, a new global passport ranking, it has sparked exactly this debate. According to the 2026 Global Passport Index, the Indian passport is now ranked 125th in the world. Last year, it stood at 124th, which means it has slipped by one place. In fact, between 2021 and 2023, India was ranked 127th. So while there is a slight improvement last year, the latest ranking shows another decline. Now you may ask, what does a passport ranking actually means for you? So the answer is very simple. The stronger your passport is, the more countries you can enter without applying for a visa in advance. The weaker your passport is, the more paperwork, more visa interview, more waiting, and more uncertainty you face before traveling. According to the report, Indian passport holders currently enjoy visa-free access to only 26 destinations. Now, for many popular destinations, including the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and most European countries, Indians still need to obtain a visa before traveling there. What surprised many people was another comparison here. According to the index, passport of countries such as Philippines, Morocco, Uzbekistan rank ahead of India. In the meantime, countries like Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan are placed below India. And yes, when we look at the world's strongest passports, European countries continue to dominate the list. In fact, Sweden is ranked at the very top, while Switzerland, Finland, Germany, Denmark, the Netherlands, Ireland, the United Kingdom, Norway, and Singapore also feature among the world's strongest passports. The United States is ranked at 11, while Canada is at 13th. Now, this raises an important question though. Why does passport strength matter so much? Because every year, millions of Indians travel abroad. Some go to study, some go to work, some start business, some visit family, and many dream of building a better life abroad. A stronger passport makes international travel easier. A weaker passport often means longer waiting period, more documentation, and stricter visa check. The report also points out that visa decisions are influenced by several factors, including concern about visa overstay and immigration compliance. It also says that many Indians continue to travel abroad for education and work, while visa rules for destinations such as the US have become stricter in recent years. And yes, at the very same time, it is very important to remember that a passport ranking does not define a country's economy, its talent, or its global influence. It also reflects how easily citizens can travel internationally under current visa policy. Now, for Indians planning to study abroad, start a career overseas, or simply take a family vacation, these ratings, they are worth understanding. But yes, they are only one part of much bigger story. Travel rules change, visa agreements change, diplomatic relationship change, and passport ranking also changes over time. What remains constant is the aspiration of millions of Indians who continue to explore opportunity across the globe. And that brings us to the end of tonight's Skyline. Ladies and gentlemen, from America's changing immigration policy to deportation strategy, from Australia's growing connection with Indian travelers to the heartbreaking tragedy in Gujarati family, from challenges faced by Indian business owners to rising ICE operation in Chicago, and finally, the latest passport ranking. Today's story reminds us that the lives of Indians abroad that is constantly being shaped by changing global events. Well, these developments are not just international headlines. They affect students planning their future, families waiting for their visas, entrepreneurs building businesses overseas, and every Indian who dreams of traveling the world. I'm Driti Atri, this is Skyline. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.